Hello there, I'm Fancy, and in this tutorial I will show you how to create bow and arrow in VR, basically from scratch with the help of a VR expansion plugin. Behind me you can already see how it is supposed to look like, so let's not waste your time and get to it. Alright, let me start by explaining how you need to have prepared your assets or 3D models. I will be using Blender, but you can of course do this in anything. And of course I will have all the assets prepared for you, so you can go down in the description and download all these assets. So what you will need is of course an arrow and bow. Arrow will be just basic static mesh, you don't need to worry about that, that's just for visuals. But our bow needs to be set up as skeletal mesh, which means that it needs to have bones. So just to quickly explain the bones, you will need at least 2 of them, one for attaching the string and one for the rest of the bow, or basically just a reference point from which you pull. Because right now if I go into pose mode and move with this one, you can see that I'm able to pull it. And if I would go into in this mesh and look at how it is painted, weight painting, you can see that our bone for string is painted heavily only on this part and really slightly right here, because you could have seen that it also moved once you pulled it a lot. The other bones should have everything else. So if you would move with this bone, it will move the whole bow, but if you moved only with this bow, it will pull only the string, which is exactly what we want. In case that you want to rig your own bow, you can just find any tutorial on rigging in Blender, it will be super simple. Alright, I'm using template from VR expansion plugin, so if you don't have it or don't know what it is about, I have a video explaining everything and how you can use it, blah blah blah. Really important, if you are making VR game in Unreal Engine, use VR expansion plugin, there is not even a question about that, especially if you are a beginner. Alright, let's create here a new folder. It should be called just a bow, open that, and what I want to do is import here all the assets. So first of all, let's put in arrow, because that's simplest, and just import it as it is, there is nothing to worry about, blah blah blah. And the other thing is of course our bow, but the bow will need to be imported as skeletal mesh, and we don't want any skeleton, so let's leave it like that and import all. Just to quickly make sure everything works, let's open bow skeleton. And you should be able to take bow string and move it. Looks pretty cool. Connect textures in the material just as they are named. You just have to match the materials. Albedo is diffuse, in case you didn't know, or base color, sorry, in this case. That's just how they called it in Unity. But let's not bother with all that and create here blueprint actor, because we will do it from nothing basically this time around. So what you want to do is to go into all classes, and it's in search bar. Let's find here skeletal mesh actor and grippable skeletal mesh actor right here. Let's select it and call it bow underscore BP. Let's open that, and as our skeletal mesh component we will of course set our bow. Alright, let's try to put it in the game to see if sizing is right, and it looks to be pretty good. By the way, if you want to know how to create a crossbow, I already made a tutorial, link somewhere here, so you can follow that. Alright, now I should be able to pick it up, so let's try that, and seems like it works pretty well. You can catch it from one hand, other hand, blah blah blah. Looks pretty good. But of course right now if I try to pull it, it will take the whole mesh with me, which is something I don't want. And if I let it go, it should simulate physics, which is good, that's what we want. If we look at our bow physics assets, we will see that we have this really weird collision, which we don't want. So what you can do is to right here, click on generate, you probably won't see it, so I will put it here, but you will have it on the right corner. So let's switch primitive type from capsule to, let's do multi-convex hull, and generate all bodies. That should give us some pretty precise collisions, and we can afford it if we don't have too many models in the game. So the next thing is of course to simulate our string. So first thing we will do is to create 2 different animations for it. So let's find our bow skeleton, and this is actually already first of our animation. So let's click on create asset, create animation, and we will take our current bows, save it into bow, and let's call it just bow underscore skeleton underscore, let's call it closed. It created automatically our animation, let's close that. And let's create our animation for pulled string. So take your bone string and pull it as much as you would like it to be. So let's say something around that. I can show you my local location in case that you wanted to really use it, but it doesn't really matter in this case. And now again, create asset, current animation, current pose, create animation, current pose. and bow underscore skeleton underscore open. And you should have here these two animations. Let's see, for closed and for open. Perfect. Let's go back in our bow BP, open that. And what we will do is to add here VR slider. So let's put here VR slider. Put that guy right here, and let's create some wonderful mesh that we will use. Well, that's not really what I expected, but hey, it will work. So something like that. Alright, that's cool. So now what I will want to do is of course save all, because you always have to save all. Click on our bow skeleton, right click and create blend space, because blend space 1D actually, because we will use blend space to transition between skeleton closed and skeleton open. So let's call it bow underscore close to open. Let's open that thing, and on the left side that will be closed and on the right side will be open. Now if you take this thing, you can scroll between that and see how it will look like. Let's go into asset details. Minimum axis value will be 0 and maximum will be 1, because we will want to go only between 1 and 0, which is cool. And let's also rename it. Let's call it string pulling. And now let's again click on our bow skeleton and create here animation blueprint. Let's call it bow underscore anim BP. And what you want to do is already in here in output pose, let's just put here our bow close to open. And let's just go into event graph. Alright, from here, let's get actor of class. And by the way, this will work only if you have only one bow in the game. If you want to have more bows, you will have to use tag system. So we will just use here get actor of class with tag, or just create different actor, doesn't really matter. Anyway, actor class we will of course set to our bow BP. And what you want to do here is to take our VR slider, get VR slider, and let's get current progress. Alright, our current slider progress, right click on it and promote to variable, and we will connect it right here. So now in animation blueprint we have progress of VR slider, which is exactly what we want, because we will take that progress and connect it right here. Because we always want to go from 0 to 1, and it should start on 1, which is cool. And it should start on 0, sorry. Alright, so for sure what I have to do in bow BP is to increase our max slide to, let's try 50, we will see what it will do. You have to kind of test it and see what works best. And what we will do here in use animation blueprint is of course to set our bow anim BP. Nothing changed, but that's cool because we don't have any progress on VR slider. Let's try it again. Alright, I can pull it, and look at that, we are pulling it together. This never stops to amaze me. And right now it's always letting go of that, but we will change it with some settings. Don't worry about that, and it's not really where I would like it to be, so I would say we'll have to set it about 40, 42, 43. Should work pretty well. 40 sounds about right, so I will leave that, but I don't really like how it always slips from my hand, so let's change a few things here. So first of all, let's disable auto drop when locked, because we don't want it to drop just when it will be on 1, because we possibly want to wait before it will shoot, but like that it will just shoot automatically. And main thing is of course here this break distance. That basically means how far you can put your hand in real life from this VR slider, from your virtual hand you can say, before it will break it. And let's say about 500, I think that I was using 500. I'm going to do here one more thing, and that will be adding here an arrow. So let's add here a static mesh. And that static mesh will be of course arrow. So let's put him here. And let's move him a bit forward so it looks like he's on that string. And let's actually make him slowly visible. I will show you a little trick how you can do that. So you will have to go into that material right here and let's duplicate it. So duplicate, let's call it material underscore arrow. Nice, let's open that. And what you will have to do here is to click on the material and switch blend mode to translucent, I believe it was. Yeah, translucent will work fine. And we will have to use only ambient occlusion map and base color, but that's fine. Because the next thing is we will also use our opacity. Let's add here a constant. Right click, turn it into parameter, so convert to parameter. Let's call it opacity and connect it right here. And by default, we will set it to 0, that's cool, which means that it won't be visible. And what we will do is to go into bow BP. And right here, let's set our material to that. So let's put here material arrow. And right now there is still a mesh, but it will disappear in a bit. And I would almost forget that this would create a bunch of bugs. So let's just set collision preset to no collisions. It's just for visual stuff, so it doesn't really matter if it has collisions. And what we will do is to go into event graph and click on VR slider and set it to on gripped. It should be on gripped right here. And first thing we will do is to create here timeline. So let's put here timeline, add timeline. Let's call it blend in. Double click on that, and what we will do is to on our float track, let's set length to 2, and you can rename that track to blending in arrow. Let's add here key, so right click, add key. On time 0, you want to have it on value 0, which is perfect, and let's add another key, and that will be on time 2. Let's set value to 1. Then select all of them, right click and switch it to auto, so it will be a bit smoother. And now let's take our arrow, set material parameter, set scalar material value on parameters. I was completely wrong, doesn't matter. That parameter value will be opacity, which is the one that we set here, just to make sure that you remember that. It's this parameter. You can think about it like we are casting to that material from this blueprint. So let's connect this and set it to update. So, and make sure that you connect it to play from start, not to play. And one more thing on VR slider, scroll down on dropped. Let's put it under that. You want to do the same thing, but just immediately set it to 0. So parameter value 0. So now it should simply slowly blend in our arrow once you gripped the slider. Let's see if it actually works as I think it should. Alright, I have here my bow, so let's try to pull it and look at that. It was really slowly blending in. First of all, let's set it to 0.8 seconds, and this also set to 0.8. In case that you don't know what I'm doing, I'm setting timeline again and shortening it. And one more thing on our VR slider, let's set slider progress to 0. So set slider progress to 0, because if you let it go, you just want it to go back to 0. Alright, let's grip it. I would say that it's still a bit too slow, but hey, we can work with that, it's not that bad. And this works fine, but if I let it go, it will quickly snap to 0, which is cool. And you can see that my hand is jumping with it, which I don't really like. So I will probably have to put there a bit of a delay, because you can see that it is attached to it, but it doesn't have time to detach and jump. So quick delay should fix that. Let's just put here delay like 0.2, 0.02. I would actually shorten that blend in much more. Let's do like 0.3. That will be cool. Like you do whatever you want, of course, but 0.3 will do it for me. Alright, let's get to last part, which is creating some sort of projectile that will work as our arrow. But before that, if you are interested in games I'm making or just stuff that I do in VR, somewhere here is my Instagram. I post there pretty much daily what I'm working on. Well, what we need is to, of course, use something that's already here, and we should have here already projectile for our gun base. Let's just put into search bar projectile, and it already was here, first person projectile. Let's right click on that and duplicate it. What we want to do is to create here arrow underscore projectile. Let's also click on this left icon and put that guy right in our bow folder. Let's open that, and first of all I will of course change my sphere. Let's change that static mesh to arrow, and let's make sure that we have material 001 and material 1, because we would have set our opacity to blah 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 something, you know how it is. And let's look into scale and switch it back to 1. Alright, let's take our collision component, and we probably don't want to have him this big. Let's put him just on the top of it. So let's look at our sphere radius and move it down like that to about 3, should be fine. Then take your sphere, and you can of course rename it to arrow and move it down to something like that, or maybe something right like this. Should be pretty cool. And I want to see how it reacts, so let's just put it somewhere in the map and change play mode. Let's change it to simulate. That was a bit too fast. First of all, I definitely don't want to have him so fast, so let's go into our projectile. And initial speed, maximum speed is set to 3000, and velocity is set to 3000. So let's change that. Let's do 500 just to test it out. We will of course then change it based on how much you pull the string, but right now let's just set it to something like that. And where is it? Why is it? I see, the problem is that it is actually flying the other way around. We have to rotate our arrow. That's a bit of a struggle. So let's rotate it and move it, of course. So now let's rotate that arrow, and I will for sure aim it a bit up because I want to see how it reacts. So let's click on play, and you can see that it reacts quite terribly. So what I can do about that is to check here one wonderful setting that will enable it rotate with velocity. So let's click here on rotation will follow velocity, which is exactly what you would expect with something like arrow, and try to make it shoot. So play, and look at that. That looks like arrow. And the next thing you could have seen was that it was bouncing like crazy, which we don't want. So let's click on shoot bounce and disable that. And look at that. Come on guys, that already looks pretty great. Right now let's just set it so it actually shoots when you pull or when you let go of a string. Then I will set up velocity and all that funny stuff. So on dropped, what we will do is to first of all put here arrow, because we need some reference point where it should be spawning. So let's put here arrow for spawning arrows, as you would guess, arrow for spawn, and make sure that you put it under skeletal mesh as I have it here, because you don't want to put it under a slider, it could kind of mess it up. And let's move it somewhere here, and I'm not sure if you should rotate it. I don't think that we need to rotate it actually. Let's go into event graph, and on our dropped VR slider, let's take our arrow for spawn, and after setting slider to 0, let's spawn actor from class, and that class will be of course our arrow projectile. Let's put it here, get world transform, and connect it right here. And I forgot that I'm actually an idiot, because you of course have to have it rotated. Don't ask, just rotate it. On y-axis about 180, on 0, 0, 0 on everything else, and let's set it somewhere like this. That should be fine. Let's see now, and look at that, we are shooting it. Cool, alright, that looks pretty cool, I would say. And by the way, if you want to set it up so that you have to pull that arrow from somewhere, put it here, etc, etc, I want to do it here because it's not that difficult, and I have done something very similar with this crossbow, so you can watch the tutorial. You have already had some link somewhere here, you already have that, so you will have to set up it something like that. It's completely the same with bow. So now let's see what we can do with that velocity. So we are spawning it right here. Let's go into arrow projectile, and first of all, we can ignore all that. You can actually delete it because we're not bouncing it anymore. But first of all, we will have to work with our initial speed, maximum speed, and our velocity. I think that actually it will be already we work just with velocity, but since we are using projectile, let's set up also our initial speed and maximum speed. We will create here custom event. Let's put here custom event. Let's call it set speed. And what we will do is to take projectile and set those three variables. So set max speed, then set initial speed, and of course, most important, set velocity. So set velocity. And in the case of velocity, we will be using only our x-axis. So we are using only floats. So what I will do is to connect it right here, rename that to speed, and take all these values from here. You can of course change maximum speed a bit, let's say multiply it by 100 so it can possibly speed up and create here some force event, but I would not really bother with that. So now in bow BP, and I'm afraid that we can't have it with a delay, that could kind of mess it up. So let's put here a sequence and take this thing and move it down here. We will take our return value and cast to, well, we are already casting to it, so we will set speed. Alright, and that speed will be set to, let's do our VR slider. get current progress, get current slider progress. Let's multiply it, float by float. Let's multiply it by about 1000, because remember that right now we are moving between 0 to 1. And then what we will do is to use some sort of base velocity. So let's take this, take it to float plus float. And that first float will be some variable. Let's set it to base velocity. And I would say that you can change it, by the way, by type of arrow or type of bow if you wanted to edit it in real time. And let's do 1000. Alright, I actually managed to successfully mess it up again. So let me fix that quickly. I am in arrow projectile. Let's recombine that. So recombine structure pin. Let's connect our vector right here. And now let's go into bow BP. And what you will want to do is our speed can be like that, that's fine. But we will have to take our arrow for spawn, get forward vector, and connect it to our velocity. Now back in set speed, what you want to do is to take your velocity and multiply it by float and connect our speed. Now that should work fine. Alright, and I would say that we did a pretty good job. Look at that. Now if I pull it a little bit, you can see it ended around that bluish thing, bluish text. I hope that you can see it. I had to downscale a lot of resolution, so I'm able to actually record it in real time. The computer is not what it should be, let's say that. So now let's take that string much more, and you can see that it flew basically to another blue text, but the important thing is that it was much further. So I would say, hey, it works. Alright, there is plenty more stuff that you can do with the projectile, but I will make actually a separate tutorial how to basically shoot people in VR, how to shoot stuff, how to set it up that sometimes you shoot an arrow and will attach to player, sometimes enemy, hopefully not a player, but you can kill anyone you want, that's up to you. And I also have a pretty simple system that you can shoot someone with an arrow and will take him and attach him to closest wall and kind of pin him right there. So I will make tutorial for that. So yeah, you can expect tutorial how to work with projectiles and basically shooting people in VR. Of course, huge thank you to everyone on Patreon. You can see those wonderful guys here. So hey, great. So thank you. And that's about it. I hope that you learned something. I hope that you enjoyed it. And that's it. Surfancy out.